Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. From the Jethro's Barbecue digital studio, I'm Justin Brady, and it feels good, doesn't it, when national, bigger publications recognize our fair state. It always feels kind of good. That just happened again. I don't know if you read this, but there was an article in the Journal, Wall Street Journal. We're calling it, "This Small Town in Iowa is the Place to Be This Summer." And of course, that was about Dubuque, Iowa. The writer of that piece, David Farley, joins me today. David, thanks so much for coming on the Iowa Podcast.
It's an honor to be here.
Where did this, what's the story? We're always a little surprised, maybe we shouldn't be, but we're always a little surprised, us Iowans, when some bigger publications, maybe the coastal elites, always discover the beautiful stuff we have to offer here. So I know you grew up in Dubuque, but what was I got to get back there moment?
Well, I probably wouldn't have even paid any attention to Dubuque if I didn't have a connection to it, but I was born there in 1971, and my family fled to sunny Southern California in 1978. And I just remember it being kind of like in 78, and I think it got worse, but the historic downtown especially was just desolate, and shops windows were boarded up, and there were lots of empty storefronts, and it was just really depressing. They built a big mall on the western side of Dubuque called the Kennedy Mall, and people started to favor those kind of shopping malls then. And then there was a kind of something happening in Dubuque starting about 20 years ago, where they started to rejuvenate the old historic town in the center, and now there's, it's really bustling. There's cool restaurants and cafes and bookstores and bars and so on. And to me, it's just a fascinating story about urban renewal for anywhere. But because I have this connection to Dubuque and I was born there, I really wanted to go back and see what Dubuque is like when it's not sad, desolate, and depressing.
Not pulling any punches today. You mentioned something key there, and there are a few things I want to go into. What was the most surprising thing? There are a couple other things, but is this a national trend that's not just limited to Dubuque? Do you see this? You're obviously a food travel writer, and you've written for more than just the Journal. You've written for the Times, National Geographic, the BBC. Is this a national trend that Dubuque is kind of keeping up with, or leading, or a part of in some way?
100%. And I feel like if it's reached Dubuque and it changed Dubuque, this movement, then it's probably widespread everywhere. That any town that had been, especially in the print version of the Wall Street Journal article, the title was called something. I can't remember the exact title, but it was actually I have it. 1 second.
Yeah.
The hard copy right here. Rebirth in the Rust Belt.
Interesting.
And I don't know if Dubuque is the Rust Belt or not, but it feels like a Rust Belt town. But I think that this urban renewal has hit the Rust Belt towns really, in a hard but good way, because I think a lot of industry had shut down in these Rust Belt towns, and companies moved away, and then the downtown became neglected, and that's kind of what happened with Dubuque. And in 1982, there were mass layoffs at John Deere. And then out of nowhere, the meatpacking plant shut down. And suddenly by 1983, there was a 23% unemployment rate in Dubuque. So people are finally it's like a reaction to the mallification of America. We got tired of these indoor, soulless, big box malls. And we wanted to feel like we were in a city with a pedestrian streets, more kind of a European style. So that's happening now, and I'm really happy about this this trend. I hope it stays with us for a long time.
Yeah, you mentioned the malls, which I wouldn't have thought of, but like malls and massive buildings meant, commercial buildings meant to simulate maybe bigger cities or something. Is it kind of true then that some of the smaller towns saw the bigger cities and like, hey, we want to go that direction, and in doing so kind of abandoned their roots, and maybe that's the thing that drove people away from them?
Yeah, I think that's totally true, actually. So, yeah, and Dubuque is just a fascinating case of an exemplary case of how we're kind of changing the way we interact with our cities and towns where we live.
Do you think we're going to see more of a remote resurgence as people like are able to go remote? They don't need, some people can work from wherever now. Do you think towns like Dubuque and smaller towns across the country are going to be able to grow their populations and see this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think so. 100%. The remote work that the pandemic was spawned by the pandemic is going to have some weird effect on our cities and towns, and I'm not really sure what it is yet, because I live in New York City, and it used to be that everyone worked in downtown Manhattan or midtown Manhattan, and now they're working remotely from their homes in New Jersey, in Queens, and Brooklyn. So it might become like a really localized thing. There's this movement called the 15-minute city, and it's meant to be like you should have everything you want for your life within 15 minutes walking from your home. So cities are kind of being designed and redesigned that way. So there was a weird conspiracy theory during the pandemic that the 15-minute city was really just a way for the government to control us and keep us in place without the agency to travel on our own.
Well, of course, because we have the 5G towers, so that all fits. Right?
And the guy who came up with this, a sociologist who came up with this 15-minute city idea, he was getting like death threats and all kinds of strange emails from lunatics who thought that it was a conspiracy theory.
That's so fun. There's no shortage of people that are going to be ticked off for the most benign, silly things. There's no shortage. When you got back there to Dubuque, you actually in the piece kind of chronicle your entire visit. Like you have time coded out. I did this and I did this and I did this. It's really fascinating. Was there anything familiar? I mean, you were young. I think 6 years old is when you said you left, or maybe
6 or 7.
You said that in the piece. Was there anything familiar, or did it almost feel like a totally different city?
It really felt like a different city because the downtown is just like blossomed with vibrancy and color, and there's all these street murals all over the place. The only thing I remember was like there's this thing called the Fenland Place elevator or the 4th Street elevator, and it's a funicular, and it's 296 feet long, so it's a short ride. And I remember that because that was like one of the main kind of iconic images of Dubuque was this funicular going up a cliff, basically. So that's it. And the reason why the story came out that way with this, like, do this at this time, do that, is because that's just the rubric of the Wall Street Journal of a type of travel story that the Wall Street Journal publishes. So originally, when my editor said, let's do it this way, and I said, okay, and I forgot about it. And when I was there, I was doing this really deep reporting, interviewing all kinds of people in Dubuque with the driving question of like, what happened? How did the city get turned around? And it was fascinating. So my first draft of this story was really like a more of a reported piece, interviewing the mayor and other people who are kind of prominent in the town about how Dubuque turned itself around. But then I sent it in, and my editor was like, no, this is supposed to be like a what to do in 3 days in Dubuque. So I was like, oh my God. So I said, okay, give me to the end of the day, I'll rewrite it. So it's a little, in my opinion, the original piece I wrote is, I think, a little bit more interesting, but maybe I'll get it published somewhere else. Who knows?
What was the most shocking thing? Was there anything that was like, because I'm assuming before you went, you kind of had an idea of what you were going to do. You kind of had a general idea of what you were going to see. No editors and no writers for that matter, bless pieces like into the complete unknown. You had some kind of idea, but what was the thing that kind of shocked you or surprised you a bit when you did get there and started writing this piece and doing your research?
Shocked me. There's a lot of fried food. Fried cheese
that
curds.
Doesn't shock us.
A lot of these restaurant bars in the downtown, they all basically have the same menu. It's interesting, but I don't think I could survive on that for longer than a week. The fried cheese curds and fried mozzarella sticks and stuff like that. But I guess what surprised me in a good way was how how friendly everyone was and willing to talk.
Oh,
That's also because I'm coming to it from the context of living in New York City, where people are friendly here, but they don't talk to each other spontaneously in the same way that they do outside of New York City. One reason I think is we're such a compact city here that I think we're actually doing each other a favor by leaving each other alone. But but in Dubuque, my wife and I would be sitting at a bar of a restaurant, and within 5 minutes we were talking to everyone sitting at the bar, and and I was like, this is amazing. But for them, that's just like a normal daily thing, and so that kind of shocked me, but in a very pleasant way.
Yeah, a lot of people are really surprised by that. And I just kind of thought that's how everybody was when I grew up here. And then, of course, now that my wife and I travel a lot for work, Iowa is very unique in that regard. I think a lot of people are surprised by like the topography and the river in that area too, because most people, I would say definitely people on the coast, correct me if I'm wrong, probably think flat and not really anything there. And so the topography is a little bit of a shock to people.
Yeah, except Dubuque is hilly.
Right.
There's some geological reason for it that I read, but I don't remember what it is. But it has 7 bluffs. Dubuque does, so that's why there's a microbrewery there called Seven Hills Brewery. So the bluffs give it this kind of dramatic look, especially the bluff that runs adjacent to the river. That's where the downtown is basically between the river and this bluff, which is what this 4th Street funicular goes up. And so it's really like quite a beautiful city because of the bluffs and the fact that it's not flat like the rest of the Midwest.
Yeah, I was surprised. Like as I travel more often, I do come back to Iowa, and I'm like, like the older people when I was young would be like, hey, I was a pretty state. It's really beautiful, and I'd be like, whatever, it's just flat and dumb, and I can't wait to get out of here. And then you start to notice when you travel to other places, just like giant sprawling open space is actually kind of unusual, and there's a really deep beauty about it. What are some of those misconceptions that you think? Because I know that Iowa would like to see more tourism. It's money. It's good. It's good for the economy. It's good for people to come here and visit. So what are some of those misconceptions you think people in like Chicago, New York, San Francisco, LA have that they would land here and say, oh, crap, I had no idea?
That Iowa has this reputation, and Dubuque in particular has this reputation for being kind of like a nowheresville. Like throughout my life, even though people didn't know I was originally from Dubuque, someone would say like, oh yeah, Starbucks is really getting popular. There's even one in Dubuque now, so
is there one in Dubuque?
Yeah, there's many. There's a lot. But I think the misconception is that it's like that there's nothing interesting going on in these places, and there is.
Right.
I ate at in Dubuque. I ate at some cool restaurants and went to some cool bars and cafes, and there's art all over the place. So like there's something happening in these towns, but people don't think about really going to Iowa. Like if you're living on one of the, if you're an elitist on the coast, no one thinks about going to Iowa. There's the condescending term flyover country. And so like true. Iowa is like exemplary of what people call flyover country. Like there's no reason to go there.
And we always get used to that, or at least in the past. I don't think it's really not as much that way anymore. But in the past, when they covered the Caucasus and we'd have all the like main anchors here, people were like, "Well, I'll be darned! I saw a car the other day. They've come a long way from the horse and buggy days." You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But everybody, we do have electricity, and we've had it, for at least for 10 years.
Right.
So,
and back to, I want to add to one of your questions that you asked earlier about something that shocked me. In Dubuque, there's a big population of people from the Marshall Islands, in the South Pacific. The island that we nuked to test out some nuclear bombs. But apparently the 3rd largest population outside of the Marshall Islands is living in Dubuque now. So that's kind of interesting.
I didn't know that at all.
Yeah, and I was hoping that there would have been like a Marshallese restaurant in Dubuque, but not yet. Because, usually when there's a large immigrant community somewhere, they start opening up restaurants so they can serve each other. But nothing yet. But I'm certain in a couple of years there'll be a Marshallese restaurant. And I have no idea what the food is like, but that would be pretty interesting.
If there's one thing, I'll probably be my last question. If there's one thing that Iowa really should, Dubuque, Iowa, maybe some of these other cities as well, really should beat their chests about to get people interested like you to come visit, what would it be? I think it's probably not obvious to us.
Yeah, I guess not, but again, it goes back to the people that I met there. Everyone was so warm and welcoming, and I travel the world and write about places I'm at, and every once in a while I come to a place, and unexpectedly the people are just so incredibly warm and welcoming, and it makes me want to root for that place. One of those places is Serbia. Everyone thinks of Serbia as being the aggressor of the wars in the 90s, and they're probably mean and brutes, but the Serbians are incredibly, incredibly nice. The other one is Ukraine. I went to Ukraine in 2019, and they were so willing to bend over backwards to help me with this article I was writing, and they were so friendly and warm. And then the other one is Dubuque. Dubuque, and Iowa in general, the people were so lovely and warm and welcoming that it makes me want to go back there, and also just to root for the place to be even better than it already is, because I really like the people there a lot.
Yeah, it is a weird spot, because not only is Iowa nice a real thing, but Iowans will actually get into politics pretty deep very quickly. I wonder if this will go away because we lost the Democrat caucuses over time. And they'll do so from a pretty neutral standpoint where they're not ready to chop someone else's head off, which is just, it's a weird state in all the best ways. David Farley, writer for the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Nat Geo, BBC, and of course, we will definitely be posting a link to that piece in the show notes of this episode, because listeners, if you don't know, it looks really, really good for freelancers and writers when tons of people hit that piece. That signals to editors, hey, this is the topic people want to hear about. So if you could all hit this piece 80 billion times, I'm sure I'd appreciate it, David would appreciate it, and the state of Iowa would appreciate it. I'm sure the Wall Street Journal would appreciate it. David Farley, thank you so much for coming on the show. What's a website in case people want to reach out to you, follow you, and read your work?
dfarley.com.
dfarley.com.
Because David Farley leads you to a funeral home. davidfarley.com. So I couldn't take it. It was already taken. So I had to go dfarley.com.
Good to know. David, thank you so much for coming on the Iowa Podcast.
Thanks. It was a thrill.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.